Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Deserts of Plenty podcast, a podcast about making our way in this crazy, mixed up world and also how to optimize our mental, physical, and spiritual health. We cover topics, everything from fasting to anti fragility to changing your mindset and your defaults and understanding empathy and narcissism and a whole range of things. And as always, I'm really keen to hear from you. So by all means, if you want to send me a note, you can leave your comments here. You can send me an email at ralph@socap.ca. That's SOCAP as in Peter.ca. And I'd love to hear from you and get your feedback about what you're doing to help your mental health, your spiritual health, and your physical health. So today I want to talk about a very interesting thing that at first glance will probably, you won't believe it. It seems really counterintuitive, which, the more I learn about myself and humans and human interaction and transaction, the more that becomes more of the rule. The things that are anti-intuitive actually are the things that are, oh, that's the thing that makes sense, or that's the thing that works. For example, we think we want to do things that in the short term are pleasurable, but things that in the short term are pleasurable in the long term will come to harm us, which we all know. If you have that extra piece of cake or stay up till 4 a.m. and watch Netflix and do that too much, or one extra drink, that's good in the short term or feels good in the short term, but in the long term, it will damage you. And then vice versa, things that are tougher in the short term, in the long term will benefit you, like going to the gym, exposing yourself to cold temperatures, not having that extra drink, going to bed early, which nobody wants to do those things, of course, in the short term, but in the long term, oh, that's going to be of enormous benefit to me and make me feel a lot better. And one thing I do is, I ask myself after something is done, if I wish I hadn't done that. Like I wake up in the morning after a night where I've been up late and I've had too many drinks. Boy, I wish I hadn't done that. I never walked out of the gym and went, boy, I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I hadn't gone to the gym. I've never gone 36 hours of fasting and afterwards went, boy, I wish I hadn't done that. Nope, I feel pretty good. And the results, as they say, speak for themselves. So today I want to talk about a very interesting phenomenon, I guess, and how maybe when you first hear it, you'll be like, that doesn't sound right. But when you really think about it, you go, well, of course it sounds right. So there was an article came out, I think it was in 2017, I believe it was the New York Daily News, but I could be wrong about that. But where it came out, it doesn't really specifically matter because it is a phenomenon. What they did in this paper, this article, is they looked at people who had won life-altering amounts of money in the lottery. I think in excess of $1 million for sure, but probably I think even more than that. And they followed up and see what their life was like a few years down the road. And what they found is between 5 and 7 years later, 70% of the people that won in the lottery were broke. Not only were they broke, but they were miserable and often in debt. I'm like, oh my gosh, like what happened? Well, they won a lot of money. They, were not prepared or equipped to handle an influx of that much cash. And so two things happened. One, they started spending like drunken sailors. The second thing that happened is that a lot of their friends and relatives came and asked for money. And either they gave them money or they didn't. And then a little bit later, the money ran out. But now they were used to spending so much money, so they overspent and they wound up in debt. Meanwhile, the friends and family that asked for money, if they didn't give them the money, those people left and turned them out. Or if they did give them money and now they're asking for it back, well, that created ripples and problems and conflicts. And so basically, a few years after winning the lottery, these people, by and large, and 70%, were broke and miserable and friendless. You're like, wow, they had so much good fortune, we would think, and then that wound up being, in hindsight, one of the worst things that ever happened to them, winning the lottery. Conversely, if you look at individuals who have received a cancer diagnosis, a positive cancer diagnosis, so they had cancer, they beat their cancer, and then 5 years out after beating cancer, cancer-free, and that's generally considered cured, their cancer is gone and not coming back. Those people, by and large, were much happier than the general population. Now, this is to be clear again. These are people who had cancer, were treated, defeated it, and then 5 years after being cleared. So they are, again, classified as having beaten their cancer. Those people were much happier than the general population. In hindsight, not that I want to say getting cancer, it was the best thing that happened to them, but what it did is it altered their lives to the point that after they had defeated that terrible condition, they became much happier. So what's going on here between these two groups of people? Or what's the same or what's different? To me, both groups had events happen to them that changed their life. On the lottery winners, what they got was a boon. They got like a huge influx of cash, which relieved from them responsibility. Right? They could quit their job if they wanted. They could buy a bigger house, get a car or a boat, whatever they wanted. But there's no real responsibility that they had. Responsibility was taken from them. They can hire nannies for their children. They can do whatever they wanted. Whereas the individuals who received the diagnosis of a disease had responsibility heaped upon them. They had to go through a very difficult process, looking at their lives, probably looking at the things that were truly important to them. And afterwards, once they came out the other side, they were much happier. So to me, it's this thing about responsibilities or constraints. I think about like the Christian view of heaven is that it's this garden with fluffy clouds, and all you do is you play the harp at the feet of God. And to me, that is hell, right? That's hell. When you get up and that's your job. That's what you've got to do. There's no nuance. There's no obstacles. There's nothing to overcome. There's no growth. It's just that. It's stagnation. That to me is hell. There's no responsibilities. You have complete freedom. And we all love freedom, but when you have too much freedom, the freedom to do whatever you want, whenever you want, that can become quite problematic, as we see from individuals who win the lottery. It's hard for them to deal with that level of non-responsibility, no constraints, right? Whereas the second group, having responsibilities, having constraints, it leads to like an overcoming of that, dealing with it. There's a reason to get up every morning, right? It's just think that it's that idea of what makes people happy, right? That's what it comes down to. What makes people happy? And if for those of us who don't have a lot of money or don't have the right partner, or we don't have, we think happiness lies in things or stuff or other people. But really what makes people happy, and it seems to be that solving problems is what makes us happy. Having a problem and overcoming it, or having constraints or responsibilities, or belonging to something that is bigger than myself. Why do so many people, not now in the Western world, but for my father's generation or my grandfather's generation, why were so many of them ready to run and join up and fight in a war? Because there is something about being part of something that's bigger than myself. Not absolute freedom, not having all my responsibilities suddenly taken from me, and having ultimate freedom. That does not seem to bring people happiness. Look at the children of billionaires. They're monsters. and to me, it's just like, well, of course, they face no obstacles. There's nothing to overcome. Every wish they want is granted. How could you not become like just a miserable person? It seems like so hard to find meaning in a life of absolute luxury, right? Like the story of the Buddha is really interesting. His father, when the Buddha was born, his father wanted to shield his son. He was a prince, and he wanted to shield him from any kind of strife, problem. He wanted his son to have this idyllic life, basically a Christian view of heaven. Every whim would be answered. There'd be no conflict. He wouldn't see suffering. He wouldn't see pain. He wouldn't see any of this stuff that goes on in our lives. And as a result, when the Buddha snuck out of the palace when he was older and he got a taste of what that was like, he's like, well, that's where life is. And he went out and lived a very miserable existence, which I'm not recommending, but I don't recommend the former either. And for me, when it comes to raising my daughter, I feel like I'm giving her the gift of letting her solve her own problems. I think certainly my first children, my older children, because I have three now, I have a younger one. I was like many parents of my generation. We were the helicopter parents and became, we wanted to intervene on our children's behalf because we know how difficult it was. Like when I went to school, there was corporal punishment. I got beat in school, I got paddled, right? Humiliating. I'm not advocating a return for that. I think it's barbaric and I'm glad it's gone. So, but I'm saying like when my children were going through school, I knew how tough school was and how I was often not believed because my parents believed that, well, if the teacher says I did something wrong, I did something wrong. So I helped remove obstacles and fight my children's battles for them. And I think that I did them a disservice in doing that. I'm not saying like keep them adrift and let them solve everything. My daughter knows if it's a real problem, I'm there and I got her back. But I let her attempt to solve her problems. And she does very readily. And she's quite resilient. And I think that's an important thing, to allow our children to make mistakes, get messy. I mean, of course, we don't want our children to get hurt. And of course, we're not going to let them get pushed around or feel like it's all up to them. But, but letting them fail, letting them get messy and show that the world can be tough and, a little bit at a time, so they have an appropriate amount of responsibility and conflict and strife and issues, so that as they grow older, they will be more capable and able to handle nuance, stressors, disappointments, failures. Because at what point are we expecting our kids to just know this stuff? Like, are they just going to grow up and like, but they magically turn 21 or 18 and they're like, oh, they can handle it? No. And I do find it very interesting that it's the same, that a lot of people who are helicoptering or bulldozing parents, or the lawnmower parents, which is the one that blazes the trail and then the children just follow behind, are also the same people that, will isolate their children as young infants in their own room, saying, well, let them cry it out. They got to figure it out. Well, where does what happened to that notion when they become, they enter kindergarten? It just seems to go out the window. Anyway, I think it's important that we let our children fail and learn disappointment. And I tell you what, I despise loot bags. I hate them. And, I get in trouble because my daughter has a birthday party. Where's the loot bags? There isn't one. I'm sorry. I try to come up with other creative ways. I mean, that's how our children, like, they're so fragile. They can't come and celebrate the birthday of their friend without also getting a present. What? That's crazy. I think that's crazy. I think we're doing our children a big disservice by telling each and every one of them that you are more special than everybody else. In a world where everybody's special, no one is. So, strife, responsibility, hardship, these things are inevitable in life. As Dostoevsky said, life is suffering. And it's true. Life is going to throw us curveballs and crap. And, that's just the way it is. And we've got to learn how to deal with that. Anyway, that's me for today. I hope you're having a splendiferous week, and we'll see you again next time. Take care. Bye.